Hi, everyone. Welcome to our January webinar. My name is Amy Shapley-Farrell, and I am the Senior Manager for Community Resources at the National Down Syndrome Society. And we are happy that you are here. If you were in the waiting room, you saw our announcement about Brighter Futures, but we just wanted to let everyone know about this exciting opportunity to be a part of coming together and learning more about different issues that impact adults with Down syndrome and aging. So please check out our link to our website or scan that QR code to find out more about Brighter Futures. Ryan, you can go to the next slide. So our webinar that you are on tonight is Helping Caregivers Plan for Today and the Future. You can go to the next slide. So thank you for joining us. Just a few housekeeping notes before we jump in and get started. We are recording this session. Please put any questions in the Q&A that's found at the bottom of your screen. There's a little like speech bubble with a question mark in it. And so you can put any questions there and I will share those with our presenters tonight. And we will be sending out a follow-up email that has resources as well as the link to the recording from this evening, any additional NDSS resources that are related to this topic, and also information about our other upcoming webinars and events, including additional information about Brighter Futures. So at this time, I want to give as much time to our presenters as possible. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan Rotundo. He'll tell you a little bit more about himself and talk about ABLE accounts. Thank you everyone for being here.
All right. Thank you so much, Amy, and welcome everyone on this lovely Wednesday evening. I hope you're having a great week and a great 2026 so far. So yes, we're going to talk a little bit about ABLE accounts. Just going to give you kind of the nuts and bolts. I will give a disclaimer that I am not by any stretch of the imagination an ABLE expert, but certainly have had my experience working at NDSS and of course a great history, which we'll learn a little bit more about with ABLE accounts, as well as some of my personal connections. So I am first and foremost a sibling. I have an older sister with Down syndrome who is an Able account user and owner. So I have had that, again, personal experience. But then by day, I am the Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships for the National Down Syndrome Society. For those who have maybe joined previous webinars, this is a relatively new title. I was formerly the Director of Programs, so getting to continue some of this great work and some of our outreach and engagement with the broader community. So, just a little bit of background and introduction to NDSS. Our mission is to create a world where individuals with Down syndrome thrive. And we do this through a couple of sort of key pillars or key program areas. Those are resources and support, research, advocacy and policy, and community engagement. So, we'll jump into those here just for a little bit more detail. So, with resources and support, we offer, of course, printed resources, digital copies of those as well, and ways that you can access them online. And they range in terms of topic from education to employment, health and wellness. And of course, aging, as Amy mentioned, we're going to be doing some great work sharing our resources and information at the Brighter Futures Conference in March, partnering with the Massachusetts Down Syndrome Congress. So there are a lot of great things that you can find on our website. Would highly encourage you all to visit that site to check out information that may be pertinent to where you are in your stages of life, or in caring for a loved one with Down syndrome, or perhaps even serving a person with Down syndrome through direct support or other professional service delivery models. Another thing that's really important and would really ask that folks could share is our 1-800 helpline and our info box emails. So these are two ways that we receive inquiries and requests and just different contacts from across the community and really just from anybody. We receive a lot of emails asking about some of our resources or different events that are coming up. So highly encourage folks to check those ways of communicating and getting involved and getting connected to the NDSS team out as you can. We also focus on research. So again, we want to make sure that we are a bridge between research and the community. I always say we like to bring people to the research and research to people. There is a lot of information out there about what research is and what it can do for individuals with Down syndrome and other disabilities. So we really want to make sure that we are sharing accurate information about the research that is out there, whether it has to do with Down syndrome regression disorder or Down syndrome related Alzheimer's disease. We are coordinating with subject matter experts and key opinion leaders in those areas and others across the country to really make sure that we are, again, able to bring people to the research and research to people. We're also doing some work to tie research into our advocacy efforts. So we are looking at ways to continue to seek funding for research that involves individuals with Down syndrome at the national level and making sure that individuals with Down syndrome are actually named or that Down syndrome itself is actually listed in some of the research that takes place in certain areas. We also focus on advocacy and public policy. So, some of you on the call may have joined us for one of our Down syndrome advocacy conferences. This is something that we typically do in the springtime. And we actually have our 2026 Down syndrome advocacy conference coming up very soon. And this is an opportunity for individuals with Down syndrome and their families to engage in advocacy and really policy change at the federal level. So getting to fly into Washington, D.C., have a day of education, an opportunity to look at different legislative priorities and taking that legislative agenda to our representatives, both on the House and Senate side. It's a great opportunity. It's also something that I think has a tremendous impact, and we've seen some really amazing things happen as a result of really your advocacy and policy work through some of NDSS's channels. I will say we also have tremendous state advocacy work that's being done. We have a program that is called our DS Ambassador program. For those who are interested in learning a little bit more about that, we can certainly give you information and follow up to this webinar and ways to get involved in some of the state level and grassroots level advocacy work that we do across the country. We also have our community engagement bucket, and this is one that I get to work with quite often. Again, Amy also on our community engagement team. This involves scholarships and ways to really elevate the voices and the goals of individuals with Down syndrome across the community. This also maybe takes a look at entrepreneurs with Down syndrome and ways to support their businesses and advancing their career goals. We also have a national buddy walk program where we just recently celebrated 30 years. And are very much looking forward to continuing this incredible tradition that kicks off the Buddy Walk season, as I like to call it, all across the United States, where Buddy Walks take place in local communities and with families all across the country, usually in the months of September, October, November, to really celebrate and recognize Down Syndrome Awareness Month and some of the great things that are happening across our community. We also have a number of ways that individuals can get involved in the work of NDSS through either fundraising or just general awareness with our Athlete Ambassador program, as well as some of the virtual racing and run events that we do. Of course, we have our gala and golf tournament as well. So very exciting and lots of great opportunities to engage. And then again, the Brighter Futures Conference. Again, this is in partnership with the Massachusetts Down Syndrome Congress, happening in Worcester, Massachusetts, at the end of March, March 27th and 28th. We would love to see you all there. Please help us spread the word. We'd love to have as many individuals with Down syndrome, adults with Down syndrome, and their family members be able to access this incredible information and opportunity to network and connect with other families. So without further ado, just a little bit of background on Abel, and I want to be mindful of the time. I told our guest speaker that she is the star of the show. So I'll get through some of these pieces and look forward to turning it over to our guest speaker. So in December of 2014, the Achieving a Better Life Experience Act was passed in Congress. President Obama signed this bill into law December 19th, 2014. And for those who don't know, the acronym ABLE, Achieving Better Life Experience. And this is really an amazing collaborative effort. The National Down Syndrome Society was certainly a leader in this, and we were very passionate about the ABLE work that we still get to do to this day. But we also had groups like Autism Speaks and a number of other national disability organizations and other stakeholders that were really championing for this bill. Again, another great example of what advocacy and policy work can do for the greater disability community. And this was no small effort. 85% of the entire 113th Congress, that's 381 of the 435 House representative members, and 78 of the 100 U.S. senators voted in favor of this bill. It's one of the most bipartisan laws ever passed in the history of any Congress, which I think speaks volumes to what happens when we unite our voices in not just the Down syndrome community, but across the disability community to make change happen. So, great effort there. So, Able Today, we couldn't do this presentation without acknowledging a tremendous partnership that we have with an organization called Able Today. This is a part of the National Association of State Treasurers Foundation, and their main focus is to promote able accounts, financial empowerment, and community inclusion for people with disabilities. Able Today provides resources and participates in presentations online and in person. We've had them do a number of presentations for us over the years. I would highly encourage you all to take a look at the YouTube video that has been, or that is a recording of a previous ABLE presentation given by Eric Akmanik from the Able Today organization. Tremendous partners there, so really want to thank them and give them credit for a lot of their great work. So this presentation is really for, I'd say, a couple of key stakeholder groups. This is for individuals with disabilities, including those that plan their finances month to month to ensure that they don't lose benefits such as SSI or Medicaid. Obviously, that's a very key piece to be calculating and understanding. This can certainly appeal to that audience, as well as to family members and caregivers who might help an individual with a disability manage some of their finances, or maybe you're planning ahead for a younger person who you're connected to who has a disability. And then, of course, for disability service providers, those of you who attend these webinars as professionals, I sincerely appreciate that as a family member and also as a former special education teacher, recognizing that there is a need here for all folks who might have a connection to someone with a disability to be informed about what some of these tools are that can help them plan for long-term financial stability. So thank you for attending, and this is certainly for you as well. So what is an ABLE account? An ABLE account is a savings, investment, and spending tool that's built specifically for people with disabilities and allows individuals to save money without impacting their public benefits. ABLE accounts are offered under Section 529A of the U.S. Tax Code. And just a little sort of fun fact is May 29th, so 529, we typically celebrate as National ABLE accounts, or it's really National College Savings Day, because it kind of ties back into those savings accounts as well. But in the disability community, we also recognize ABLE accounts and the great opportunities that they offer the greater disability community on May 29th. So maybe when that rolls around, you can help us celebrate that as well. So ABLE accounts by the numbers. Just to give you an idea, ABLE accounts are offered through a state-run ABLE program. So each state-run ABLE program is a little bit different, and we do have some great resources which we'll link in this presentation that will help you locate those or help you sort of refer other individuals to those resources. You'll notice the link down at the bottom, ABLE Today's National ABLE Data Report, and some of this information comes as recently as September of last year. So that report tells us that there are 46 states and the District of Columbia that offer ABLE programs, that currently there are over 223,000 total ABLE accounts, and that number is increasing every day. I was doing a little bit of fact checking, and that number has nearly doubled since the last time we gave this presentation about 2 years ago. And another number that has nearly doubled, $2.87 billion in ABLE accounts across the United States, again, since we gave this presentation about 2 years ago. Key benefits. This is really important. Multiple functions, including short-term spending and long-term savings, so a little bit of flexibility there in terms of how those dollars are ultimately spent. Opportunity for financial empowerment and community inclusion, again, giving a person with a disability an opportunity to save and put back resources. And it's an alternative to spending down, and it remains a public benefit. ABLE accounts are also owned by the person with a disability. So that is the person whose name is listed on the account. They're easy to open, easy to close, easy to use, and they're similar to just a regular bank account. Obviously, we'll get into some of the details of how funds can be spent and how funds can be contributed, but they are still very user-friendly. They're also tax-free, and some states offer tax deductions and/or credits for these accounts. So eligibility, how can a person, or maybe better way of phrasing that is, what's the profile of a person who could open or have an ABLE account? ABLE accounts are for individuals whose disability began before the age of 26. There has been some ABLE legislation that's looked to expand and kind of extend that number up to the age of 46. Um, but currently, age of 26 for eligibility, people can open an ABLE account at any age. Obviously, with that requirement in place. The disability must also be long term, so for more than 12 months, and must cause marked and severe functional limitations. That's in quotations because that's actually written as a key phrase within the law itself, within the ABLE Act. Additionally, you can be eligible for an ABLE account if a doctor has diagnosed you with a disability, physical or mental, or if you're eligible to receive SSI or SSDI due to your disability. And you do not have to be on public benefits to open an ABLE account. So how does this happen? Well, the easiest, I guess maybe in many cases, the easiest way to do that, like many things in our lives right now, is online enrollment. You can also find your ABLE program by looking for more information at the link provided. And then ABLE programs really allow you to either enroll online, you could submit a paper application if that's your preferred process, or you can enroll at a bank branch. Also, there's flexible enrollment, which allows the individual with a disability to open and administer their own ABLE account, or an ABLE support person can oversee and manage that account. So, depending on the person's situation, there may be, more of a need to have some support with that. Who can serve as an ABLE account support person? People with disabilities can open and administer their own ABLE accounts. An ABLE support person can also be an individual or an organization. So in some cases, you may have a family member who's representing that support person role, or it could be that you have a trusted paid support staff person. Again, could be natural support, could be paid supports. That could also be managing multiple accounts. So for those of you who may be attending this call and you are more on the professional side of the kind of the disability community and where you work with individuals, maybe you have several clients or folks that you work with, and you're helping to manage those accounts. There is a hierarchy for who can be an ABLE support person, which is, of course, power of attorney, conservator, guardian, spouse, parent, sibling, grandparent, and then a Social Security representative, payee. So we kind of have to go down that list and verify that those individuals are in fact, not serving as the ABLE support person before we go to the next. Getting money into an ABLE account. There are several ways that this can be done, and I think that there's still opportunity for growth here. We're looking at ways for employers to make direct contributions. That is something that's still sort of in the works, and I think we're still looking at ways to expand ABLE legislation to really make sure that that's a possibility, so that there can be equity in terms of employer contributions for individuals who have a disability and are employed. But ABLE offers a variety of options for getting money into those accounts, including general banking options such as depositing money electronically or by check. Most programs allow for payroll deductions or e-gifting. And then funds in a college 529 savings account can be rolled over into an ABLE account. So if families have started planning for college early and then decide later that they would like to convert that over into an ABLE account or roll that over, that can be done as well. So how much can you contribute? Recent numbers. So in 2026, the annual contribution limit to an ABLE account increased to $20,000. This was up from, I believe, 18. Contributions can come from any source, including directly from ABLE account enrollee, family, friends, organizations, nonprofits, and employers. I mentioned earlier, I have an adult sister with Down syndrome who has an ABLE account. I can make contributions to that ABLE account. She'd prefer I take her out to eat, but I can certainly make contributions as well. Some employed account owners are also eligible to make additional contributions each year above and beyond the standard $20,000 limit. There's some, sort of nuance to that. That is called the Able to Work contribution. There's a little bit more information that you can take a look at there at the link provided. Annual costs. So the beauty of this is also that it's a relatively manageable and relatively low cost type of account. So ABLE programs have fees associated with the ABLE accounts. The annual fees for the accounts range from $0 to $60, and asset-based fees range from zero to 0.9% amongst various state ABLE programs. So it just depends state by state, and you can certainly find more information to get those exact numbers within your state program at the link provided. So investment options. Most ABLE accounts do offer multiple places to put your money. You can pick one option or spread your money across multiple options. You can choose from checking or savings options that are Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation or FDIC insured for market-based investment options such as stocks, bonds, etc. So a couple different ways to invest there as well. Then the spending. I think this is probably where people have sometimes the most questions. It's how do we actually use the funds that are in an ABLE account? So they do have broad base spending power for qualified disability expenses, and that is a very key phrase to keep in mind. A qualified disability expense is anything that relates to the disability and helps maintain or prove health, independence, or quality of life. Some examples, and this is not an exhaustive list, but some examples, and also this is an incredibly detailed list. But it's housing, rent, transportation, assistive technology, high tech or low tech, health and wellness, basic living expenses, education, financial management, and legal fees. Sorry, education, financial management should be separate, and then legal fees. So how to withdraw money from an ABLE account. Different ABLE programs have various options for withdrawing funds, but again, very similar to a checking account. Could be a checkbook, could be third-party checks, purchasing cards such as like a debit card or some other form of swiping card, or bank transfers can be used as well. So the best special benefits rules for SSI and Medicaid. This is important for individuals who are currently receiving these government benefits. If you receive SSI, balances over $100,000 start counting toward SSI resource limits. So again, if you're receiving SSI, the balances over $100,000 in an ABLE account would start to count toward the SSI resource limitations. If you would like to withdraw funds from your ABLE account to use for housing, you must spend it within the same calendar month. So there's a little bit of a caveat there in terms of how those funds are spent and, of course, how much can be in there if you're currently receiving SSI. If you receive Medicaid, there is no balance limitation that would count towards the resource limit. So Medicaid payback still applies to ABLE accounts, and just as it applies to other bank accounts. And again, just to check with those, the local service, or excuse me, the state ABLE account programs to confirm. If you already have or you're considering a special needs trust, this is another very common question. You can do both. ABLE accounts can complement a trust, and I do believe our guest speaker will touch a little bit more on that. But special needs trust can accept larger annual deposits than an ABLE account can. People frequently put large deposits into a trust, and then they regularly transfer that money into an ABLE account for easy access. So again, there's just different ways of using these two separate tools, but they can also be used together. ABLE accounts can also be helpful because they're often less expensive to set up and maintain. With a special needs trust, obviously, you may need to consult with an attorney to kind of help those things go into motion. With an ABLE account, again, you can go to a bank branch and set that up for very little fee. So ABLE resources and next steps, a couple of links here for you all that you could certainly check out. Again, when we follow up and you get the slide deck from this presentation, all of these links will be live. So some resources on the NDSS page. We have our ABLE 101 guide. We also have the ABLE short video and webinar that I mentioned earlier. Both of these are great resources. Just take a look at the date on those videos, as they are a little bit dated, and some of the ABLE legislative pieces are currently and continuously in motion, continuing to try to expand how Medicaid can support the greater disability community. So just take a look at those dates. But again, that ABLE 101 guide is a great resource. And then the National Down Syndrome Society's Financial Wellness Guide. which was made possible by a tremendous partnership that we have with Voya Financial. That resource is available at the link provided and offers just sort of a holistic view of how individuals with Down syndrome and other disabilities, their family members might want to take into account some of the other financial tools and ways to plan ahead to ensure that a person with Down syndrome or another disability could have financial wellness for the long term in life. And then I mentioned Able Today, some amazing resources that have been linked throughout the presentation, and you have some opportunities to see and hear from the experts at the Able Today's National Association of State Treasurers group, and those are some incredible resources as well as a podcast and some other great things to check out there. So next steps, I would highly encourage you all to research ABLE programs via the ABLE Today website. So taking a look at state by state differences. It could be that your family member, someone you're connected to, might be considering moving from one state to the next. So please do compare those programs and take a look at the resources that are on that site. Also, you can help spread the word. It's one of those things that we just can't say it enough. ABLE accounts are a great tool. Individuals with disabilities should definitely look into that. It's a great financial savings opportunity. So please help us spread the word and educate folks about this great tool that we have at our disposal. And then again, feel free to reach out. This is a contact sort of general helpline email for our folks at Able Today. And then, of course, if you would like to reach out to the National Down Syndrome Society, we have our contact information here as well. And that does it for my presentation. And I would love to introduce you all to Miss Jennie Dopp, who will share more information as I disconnect and stop sharing my screen. And I'll pass it over to you, Jennie. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much. So give me just one moment here and I'll grab my screen and you will have to let me know if you can see that. Are you guys seeing my screen okay there?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, perfect.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So today we are going to give you an overview of how to put together a life care plan. And I am with an organization called CaringTide. We're relatively new, even though we're not new to the disability space as an organized group. We've been around for almost 2.5 years. So we're new to a lot of people. And so if you haven't ever heard of us before, I encourage you to check us out, caringtide.com. And we are, like I said, a disability planning organization, but we're a little bit different than some other entities out there because we are a holistic organization, meaning we plan for the whole family. And I want to start by just introducing myself briefly. So I'm the COO and the director of the CaringTide Family Program. And I help families all across the country put this planning process together for their family. And I do this for two specific reasons, professionally and personally. So I have 4 biological children, ages 19 all the way up to 27. And my second child, Jackson, is there in the gray sweater vest on the right-hand side, and he's now 25. And he was diagnosed with a rare chromosome duplication. So I feel like I'm a little bit part of this world with chromosome duplications, but it was called 7q11.23 duplication. He was the first diagnosed in our state when the genome was finally mapped and the 11th in the world. And so I was on this quest for resources because I really didn't have organizations like NDSS to show me the way, mentor, guide. And so I've become somewhat of an expert in finding resources for families. And that transitioned into being executive director of a nonprofit, building transition to adulthood curriculum, Medicaid waiver guidebooks, you name it, I've been around the block. And I've been in this space for about 17 years, helping families across the country. And then just most recently with this position with CaringTide. So like I said, CaringTide's a disability planning organization. We work with families all across the country. We're licensed in all 50 states. And our mission is really this. It's to give every single family who has been impacted by disability the opportunity for lifelong guided support. And I've talked with hundreds, if not thousands of families over my career. And one thing that I hear over and over again is, I don't know what I don't know. And I don't know my next right step. I feel like I've gone as far as I can go. And, you go through the basics of getting through early intervention and maybe doing the IEP or a 504 in school. And then you kind of get to a place in life where you either get stuck there, and we hit a lot of roadblocks in our personal journey in all of those stages. But then you reach transition to adulthood and things really escalate because you might not know your next right step. I should mention the founder of our company. He might be a familiar name to this group of folks who are listening today. His name's Brady Murray, and he has a nonprofit called Rod's Heroes. We promote Down syndrome adoption and then also CaringTide. And he has two sons with Down syndrome and one son with 22q deletion. And by trade, he's a certified financial planner, and he's been doing this for over 23 years of helping families. And it is such a work of the heart for us because we are walking this path with you in our own homes. In my case, I'm going to use a lot of personal examples today. In my case, it's been a lot of white knuckling it, to be honest, because there's a lot of mental health challenges with our family, and it's been challenging. And so we try to meet families where they are. What is it that's on your plate? What's the family dynamic? What's the situation? What does it look like? And then we try to help you find your next right steps. So let's jump into it. The number one concern that I hear from families is, who will care for my child if I can't? And we need to switch that up just a little bit, because it's not a matter of if I can't, it's a matter of when I can't. And there's reasons for that. Again, my personal situation, my husband was at a new position with work, and he was qualified, I guess you would say, for some higher level insurance. And so there was a nurse that came out to our house and did some blood work, and it was identified that some of his levels were high. And so through just a regular physical to try to figure out what was going on with him, we actually identified cancer. And when we got into the deeper diagnosis of it, it was quite aggressive. And while we hoped that he would be able to get rid of all the cancer through treatment, there was something else going on in the body, and we could not figure out what was the root cause of how it was impacting him. And it was to the point where they said, if we don't find this, he will pass away. And so automatically, as a mom of these 4 kids, because it was a few years ago, and I was just working part-time at that point because Jackson had such a severe need for help. I just thought, how am I going to do this as a mom to support these 4 kids and do this on my own? And so immediately I jumped to questions. And it was, okay, right out of college, we had this term life insurance in place. And now it's all of these years later, I think it's going to expire like in a year or two. And so I had to figure that piece out, and I had to figure out our trust and to make sure that was up to date, and that I was the beneficiary on all of these accounts that we needed to check. And so that was some of the questions I navigated at that point. But in other times of my life, we've navigated other questions like, what's my recourse with the school with an IEP if I don't agree? What is this thing called a transition IEP? How do I know if guardianship or conservatorship, depending upon the state that you live in, what's the right choice? And now there's this new thing called supported decision making, but yet my son has high need, but we kind of have a foot in both worlds where he could do it, but he can't do it. And what's vocational rehabilitation? Aren't they supposed to be doing something for me, but I feel like it's all on me and I'm doing it myself? And gosh, FSI seems so overwhelming. And I don't even know the difference between an executor or a trustee. These are all the kinds of questions that I get from families. And that is our job at CaringTide, is to really guide you, to be your guide on this path, to be your Sherpa, to walk with you along this journey. Because you not only need help when you are going through this IEP situation, but then you've got age 16 and dating and maturation and hygiene and socially appropriate, and then guardianship, and then this tricky age of 18 where all of a sudden you become eligible if you haven't been in the past for all of these support services. And so that's what we help families do, is walk with you not only through the foundational planning period of time, but then continuing on throughout your child's life. So when something happens, you just reach out to your support network here at CaringTide, and we will guide you through that next step. But the way that we do this is through a life care plan. And this may be a new term to you. Maybe a lot of you know what a special needs trust is, or an IEP, or maybe you even know what an emergency plan or a letter of intent is. But a life care plan is actually putting that entire piece together. And it's a coordinated strategy where you are layering in all of these pieces so that you don't have any gaps. Again, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so this is really a helpful process for families to really go through and do an assessment on where are you at today and give yourself total grace, because you know what? So many of us are white knuckling it and just getting through the day. And you can't possibly have time to do every single thing today. So we've got to do it in bite-sized pieces. And that's our methodology at CaringTide, is to take you through 7 foundations of planning. And our mission, if you remember back to one of those beginning slides, is to give this training to every single family impacted by disabilities. And that's why I'm here today, is this is part of our effort to give back the training to families so that you can think about where you are and start to fill in your own gaps. So today we'll go through some of these different areas, and this is recorded. They are going to send it to you. I want to warn you, this is a little bit of a fire hose experience, because I do want to go through all of these 7 foundations and help you understand the components so that you can start to address the gaps in your plan. The first thing I want to do is make sure that you try to make your plan as comprehensive as possible. And we want your plan to be family-centered. So for most of our family's experience with Jackson, he's been at the center of our plan. I mean, we plan our family vacations around what will work for Jack, who goes to the grocery store, what seat people sit in the car, who gets the blue plate at dinner, who's first in line, is the music too loud, is the baby crying? All of these things have to be taken into account when Jackson's in the picture. And it's the same with our life care planning. But if I only plan around Jackson and I don't plan around other people, then my plan is going to have some gaps and it won't be as complete as it normally would. I want to consider my children who are typical, who don't have significant disabilities. All of my children have things like anxiety and ADHD, and honestly, they have some CPTSD, some complex post-traumatic stress because of being raised with kind of a volatile brother. And so I need to make sure I'm addressing their needs. And as I go through and I update my plans from, every 3 to 5 years, most likely is what we recommend, I want to reconsider where my other kids are. Are they in a position where Jackson could live with them? Would they be in a position where maybe they could be a support, but they don't want to be the direct caregiver? Are they mature enough now and have the financial acumen or the acuity, the financial knowledge to manage a trust? Or are we still at a level where I'm looking at an outside fiduciary to invest the trust and manage the funds? I also want to consider me and my husband, because we want to be able to enjoy our retirement. We want to be able to travel. We want to be able to leave him. He has a job. He works 4 to 5 days a week at McDonald's, and it's awesome. He loves it. He's really good at it. His autism superpower with his dual diagnosis really kicks in, and the routine is just right in his wheelhouse. Manages the drive-through, takes cash, all of the things. So it's been great. It's been a journey to get there. Like I said, he's 25. But we are on the hook for transportation, navigating his manager and his schedule and all of those things. And I know that sounds like, oh, well, gosh, that's not complicated compared to what you're dealing with. But on the other side, we also have this young man that will become emotionally dysregulated and run down the street. So I really am working on both ends, and I've got to figure out how to make sure everybody's needs for our family's dynamic is taken care of. Now, I want you to think about the timelines. This is your cute neighbor down the street. They have a baby. The baby's born. Everything's great. And then this child graduates from high school and they launch into college, and then they're focused on themselves and retirement. Well, my journey was a little different, and I'm sure some of you can maybe relate. Our journey started at 5 months in utero when we found out brain structure anomaly was present in Jackson, and perinatologist visits and specialist visits, and 2 days out of the hospital with an emergency C-section, we were at another specialist's office. And so it's been like this throughout Jackson's entire life. And I'm sure some of you can relate to this as well, especially those of you who have children that not only have the disability, but the special health care need with some medical challenges. And so I just want to acknowledge these stages, that it's different for each of our families, that there's milestones that we meet that are typical, but also all of these other milestones. And we have to take them into account when we plan. Here's another model that I'd like to show you. If you've ever heard of a wonderful person by the name of Dave Ramsey, this is kind of like a nod to a model that would be similar to a traditional model of where you're saving money, you build your emergency plan, you pay off some debt, and then your wealth starts to accumulate, and it's just a pretty straightforward model. He also recommends things like not have only having term insurance when you're younger and you're saving assets, but you don't need the term insurance when you get older. And I'll talk more about this later, but that's a good strategy, and it can be depending on your situation. If you're a typical family, well, our family and your families are not typical. And so we have to plan from a life care planning perspective. So here's just 3 examples, and I'll go into more detail on this. But proper gifting and inheritance. Grandpa has some property up in Idaho. It's beautiful. It's on a river. And let's say he sells that property when he's getting ready to pass, and he gives a little piece of the proceeds to each of his 30 grandchildren. And we get a check here at our house in Jackson's name for his allotment of that sale of the property. Well, that can be pretty catastrophic for Jackson's planning. And I would then have to go into reactive mode and try to figure out where I can put that funding and get it out of Jackson's name. And we'll talk about some strategies to do that. But it's important that you, as well as your extended family and friends, understand why this planning is important. And we can't just bury our head in the sand and not do it and not talk about it, because it's happening. I won't live forever. It's that line from Meet Joe Black. There's nothing for sure in life except for death and taxes. And that will happen for all of us. We won't be here forever. I know my goal is to live one day longer than Jack. And, I don't know if that will happen because he's pretty healthy, but I need to take care of this. So the other things that we want to plan for are, what is the cost of all of the supplemental needs? We might be able to count on things like Social Security and Medicaid, or you might be in my boat, where because of our state and the way it's set up fiscally, Jackson doesn't qualify right now for Medicaid through the state, through waivers. He's on a wait list and will be for probably until I pass away and his need becomes more urgent. So think about all of the different pieces that you'll need: guardianship, the special needs planning for the legal side, and then also, how about the costs that you don't think about right now because you're covering it all? Housing costs, programs, vocational training if there's not funding available from vocational rehabilitations, and then of course some cash reserves. So the first thing you'll want to do too is also create your mission statement. So this is Brady and 2 of his boys up in the mountains. They love to fish and to hike and hunt. And you need to think about what's important to your family. Jackson loves to travel. We live in the desert, and so we love to go to the beach. And so we try to find a way to get an inexpensive trip to the beach planned. So I want to build in some travel. Jackson's autism superpower is politics. He keeps me posted on everything our president is doing, everything happening at the state. And so as you can imagine, we have some tense conversations. And so if he doesn't have a computer or he doesn't have a phone where he can access the internet and Wi-Fi, I know that's a first world problem, but that is quality of life for him. That is giving him purpose. That's helping him develop his interests. And so I want to make sure that I build that into the plan as far as what are the things that are important, not only to our family, but also to Jackson, whether that's education or that he live in a certain type of environment. I want that documented. The next step is the emergency plan. This is what should happen in the first 24 to 48 hours after a life-changing incident. I'll just talk about this picture really quick because it's important today. Even today, our state legislature started meeting today, and we found out there's going to be a 10% cut across the board to HCBS Medicaid waivers, and that's catastrophic to our funding. It lowers wages down to service providers to like $12 or $13 an hour, which isn't sustainable for the program. And so just make sure you're keeping tabs on your state as your legislature starts to meet this calendar year, and make sure you're up to date on advocacy for Medicaid waivers and Medicaid funding in your state. But back to the emergency plan, make sure you have one documented. If you sit down and do it, we have templates we share with our clients, but you can pretty much do that in a night of just getting all of the basics down. The bigger job is creating your letter of intent, the LOI. This is your guidebook on Jackson or your children. This is helping the next caregiver understand what is needed to care for Jackson and by extension, the rest of the members of your family. So here's some ideas of things that you could consider. Things like what helps people be independent in your family? What about financial well-being, quality of life, employment, education, housing needs? A couple of things that you should know is that a letter of intent is not necessarily legally binding, but it's very helpful to those caregivers and providers. And as I show these slides, I won't have time to go through every single bullet, but you are going to get the recording. You can come back, watch certain sections, pause it, and really digest the information. I would also encourage you to put questions. If there's something that I'm explaining and you don't quite get it, put a note in the chat and we'll try to save some time at the end for that. But the letter of intent is really helpful. Also times there might be a situation where your estate, because things weren't set up correctly, would go through probate. And even though it's not legally binding, this can be a great guide for not only counsel, but a judge who's looking at the probate. So make sure and complete your letter of intent. Again, we have templates for you. The medical care notebook is a great tool. So you can use this in two ways. Let's say I have a child with special health care needs. Maybe there's seizure protocol, maybe there's a G tube or an NG tube or some sort of protocol that really needs to be documented, because if you weren't there and you don't know all the little things, the next caregiver doesn't know all the little things, this will really help them. So you can use it to document your processes and procedures, the list of specialists, the list of medications, dosages, time of day that the meds are given. But it can also be used in another way with Jackson, where he is given either a digital copy of a medical care notebook or even just a paper notebook, some sort of binder or file. And it will start to teach him medical advocacy, where he can start to track his own labs. He'll have a list of his specialists. I'll give you one example. Jackson will, based on the 7Q dupe diagnosis that he has, it's possible that he could have an aortic aneurysm because of an aortic valve problem. And so we have to monitor this every year with cardiology. And if I don't document all of this, that will be leaving Jackson open for some problems and potentially life-threatening situations. So this is definitely something that you'll want to document. The next area is accessing benefits. And so we'll talk about a couple of these. I teach entire classes on ABLE accounts or Social Security or Medicaid or IEP support. So I can only give you a taste test today, but I want to give you enough context of how to put this whole life care plan together in case you're missing a piece of it. And especially for younger folks who are not yet qualified for SSI, it is overwhelming. And so we want to hold your hand through that. But you'll see on the left-hand side what public benefits typically cover, and it's not very much. This year we had a little bit of a COLA increase, and so depending on your state, typically $994 is about the amount that you would receive on Social Security. If you live in a place like California, there's a stipend on top of that, so you're getting a little bit more. But really, it's just enough to cover like your room and board and basic needs. Maybe if you have a Medicaid waiver through your state, it's called an HCBS, Home and Community-Based Services Waiver, then those waivers can tend to pay for some things like respite care or employment supports or possibly a day program. But then if you're like us and we don't qualify yet for waivers because we're still sitting on that list, the wait list, everything is private pay. And even if you get Social Security and Medicaid, there's things it doesn't cover or you don't have enough money for. And so this is where Jackson's cell phone is going to come in, his Wi-Fi, the haircuts, t-shirts, some transportation costs, all of the other things are going to be private pay, and you've got to figure out how to fund that. So will you come up with an ABLE account strategy like we talked about? Maybe moving money from SSI over to ABLE, or maybe moving money from SSI over to your rent and fair share that your child's paying, and then maybe back to the ABLE account, or from the rent and fair share pool that you can use for household expenses, you can shoot that over to a standalone special needs trust. There's a lot of ways to figure out how to move this money around, and I'll show you a little bit more on that a little bit later. But let's talk about the basics of Social Security. I just added the calendar icon to that, and that's because there's some timelines. If your child's younger than 18, they won't qualify for Social Security unless your income is low enough where it's deemed appropriate for them to access Social Security. Or if you're a parent and you have a disability yourself and you're drawing Social Security, then your child might be able to access it as well before they're 18. Or if you've had a parent pass away, it's possible that they could access Social Security. But for most of the families in this country, most children will not get Social Security until after their 18th birthday. And the other thing that you should know is once you get the Social Security, then you would most likely get Medicaid. There was a comment that said, or if a parent retires, and that's true. I'll talk about that on the next slide. But if a parent retires, then the child can usually, and they're drawing Social Security from the parent, if the parent's drawing Social Security, I should say, then the child typically would get up to half of that projected amount that the parent gets. And then once the parent passes away, the child would get about 75% of the parental amount. There's some things called family maximums where a family can only get so much Social Security. Everybody's a little bit different on that. It's not a set amount. There's actually a formula that they use to figure out what that would be for your family. But just know that there are some limits there. And it is a great feature that you can most likely get Medicaid once you get Social Security because the eligibility requirements are pretty similar. Let's quickly talk about a different program. It's called SSDI. There's a few ways to access it. We mentioned two of those. One is if a parent starts drawing their own Social Security, Jack would come off of SSI, move over to SSDI, and get the projected 50% of the projected amount, up to 50%. The other one is when the parent passes away. And then the other one is on Jackson's own work credit. So he started working at our local amusement park when he was like 15 or 16 years old, just an easy little summer job to expose him to the community. And then he moved to McDonald's, and like I said, he's 25, so he's been paying into FICA for quite a few years, and he works about 30 hours a week. So there's quite a bit there. When we actually went to apply for Jackson, he never even went on Social Security because I applied a little bit later, and he went right on to SSDI, which is great because he gets a little bit more money than that $9.94 a month. And I don't have to worry about that asset level right now because he doesn't get Medicaid. If I did get Medicaid for him, then we would need to worry about that $2,000 threshold that exists for our families, unless you live in a state that has a law that doesn't look at the asset level. So SSDI is important. The other change that happens there is once you've been on the program for 24 months, then you would switch over to the Medicare program. And this happens for people and it's unexpected sometimes. And so it's important to know this because if you have a physician or a person who's accepting your Medicaid and they take the Medicaid, but they don't necessarily take the Medicare, that's an important thing to know. Now to give you just a quick crash course in Medicaid. The Medicaid's like a house. Just think of it as like a front door or a back door, different ways to get in. Medicaid is not the same as Medicare. So right now there's a lot of discussion in the country about Medicaid, and people who are not educated about Medicaid thinks it's just overused and, that it's just a horrible thing. But I would just want to give you this little crash course on why your advocacy as a parent is so important. We get this block of Medicaid. Every state gets some Medicaid from the federal government, and some states just stay with that same amount of money. Other states add to it with a little bit of a match. And then that funding goes down into programs for things like babies who are born without insurance or the unhoused population. And then for our population, Medicaid healthcare, and then also the Medicaid waiver supports, the HCBS waiver supports. Every state has a different waiver program. Every state gets to define what those look like and the requirements. But one thing that's pretty consistent is a specific waiver that's meant for our population, IDD, of intellectual developmental disabilities. And this is the waiver that's going to help you access things like respite and day programs. Possibly if your state has something called caregiver compensation, or in California, it's called IHSS, lots of different names for it, where parents can be the caregiver and actually get paid for that. So this would be an important resource that we are layering into this life care plan. So we've got Social Security, Medicaid, and then the assets we leave for our kids. And then if there's a gap that we'll identify for that special needs trust funding. So let's dig into the legal piece of this, of how to put this whole plan together. So you want to work with a qualified attorney. I know that everybody thinks they have a qualified attorney, but you want to double check this, because when I get clients' documents and I review them and I see that they, first of all, don't even have a special needs trust, or it was set up incorrectly. And so you really want to work with somebody who's qualified. There's so many great attorneys out there and financial planners out there, but you'll want to make sure you work with professionals that understand how this all will work together for your good and how things impact each other. So an elder law attorney is a great place to start with your estate planning. And sometimes it's called a CELA, C-E-L-A, Certified Elder Law Attorney, or an elder law attorney means somebody who typically works with the older population who's putting together estate planning. Then, once you find that person and you know that they're qualified to do estate planning, you'll want to go deeper and make sure they understand how to put together disability plans, that they understand the Medicaid and Social Security and what's called special needs trusts, supplemental needs trusts. And also conservatorship or guardianship, depending upon if your state requires an attorney for that process. Some states like Utah don't require an attorney for guardianship. I can do it with what's called pro se, and I can do it myself through our court system. So as we get into the estate planning piece, there's a lot of benefits for putting together an estate plan. It gives you a lot of power while you're still alive to direct where your assets go, who they go to, if you want to leave some money for charitable giving. But the biggest thing that I see for our population is it will help you avoid something called probate, where after you pass away, your estate would have to go through the probate process to make sure all of your assets get divided out appropriately to your beneficiaries. And then there would also be potentially some taxes that would need to be paid. So to avoid that whole process, the costly process of probate, it's important to put your estate planning documents in order. If you don't have capacity to do it right now and you're like, Jennie, I don't even have an extra dollar to do that right now, that's on the list and I'll get to it. At least start with the things you can do today. So one of the things would be a HIPAA release, or what's called an ROI, a release of information. You can get that on file with your doctor's offices, because once your child turns 18, you're locked out of what's called the EMR, the electronic medical record, or some of the systems that they use to get you lab results or to book appointments. And so when this happened to us, they said, I'm sorry, we can't book that appointment for you, or we can't give you those lab results because we need to talk to Jackson. He is an adult in our system on his 18th birthday. And so it's great to be proactive and make sure that you have that, especially if you have a lot of specialists. The next piece is that guardianship, conservatorship, or supported decision-making piece. There's not a one size fits all. You have to go through and really analyze based upon your child's needs, your child's level of support. Are they high need? Are they low need? Is there an elopement risk? Are they at risk for being taken advantage of? Are there safety concerns there? Or do they understand what's happening? Are they able to communicate? Are they able to advocate for themselves? Would they be able to, withheld get an apartment by themselves? Can they work with their case manager on the waiver? How much support do they need? And then based on what your child needs, then we would want to look at the different layers of support there. Some of my clients who have a child with IDD actually just only have a power of attorney for medical and financial, and then they use supported decision making. Other clients opt for full guardianship or conservatorship, or they opt for limited, where you're just having that support put in place for things like medical, financial, or housing. So everybody's different. There's pros and cons to all of it. Your state, even though I hear a lot, I don't want to have guardianship because I don't want to remove all the rights from my child. Well, in our state, you can still have guardianship. Jackson can still get married. He can still vote. He can still drink alcohol. He can talk to who he wants to talk to. There's things, it's called the Guardianship Bill of Rights. So look up your state's guardianship rights that your loved one would retain, and then you can decide what might be appropriate. I've had other clients that after we present all of the options to them and we really dig down, their plan was POA and SDM, but then we see that that child doesn't understand what they're signing. And one of the things that you'll want to be aware of is legally from a POA, power of attorney perspective, your child should technically understand what it is they're signing. There's two types of power of attorney. I'm not an attorney. I'm just giving you general information today. But the two types that you could describe to your attorney are a springing power of attorney. That's what I have for my husband. It springs into effect when he becomes incapacitated or I need to act on behalf of him. It's called being his agent. Or the type of POA I have for Jackson would be a durable power of attorney. And that durable power of attorney goes into effect the day it's signed so that it's in effect for me to use for Jackson. However, those are revocable. So there's limitations there. If Jackson was persuaded to have a new POA signed, then that new POA is what goes into effect. And so you would have to work that out legally. Where guardianship, it's a legal decree. And so you would go before a judge and get a legal decree, and the only way to get rid of that is going back before the judge again to get that dissolved. So again, you'll want to consider, does my child really understand a power of attorney, or is that supported decision-making really the best option? Or is their circle big enough where they really are with supported people most of the time and they're okay? The other thing that you'll want to consider is a will. Does your child need a will? In Jackson's case, he's been working for many years, and so he's assembled this little nest egg that he can use for video games and haircuts and Star Wars t-shirts and things. So Jackson would actually need a will so that it would show what he wants done with his assets. But as we jump into the parent's perspective of estate planning, we want to first talk about the way a will works for parents. Again, I'm not an attorney. This is general information tonight, but this will help you be able to have that conversation with your legal counsel to start to put this together. There are some states that have a high enough probate threshold where a revocable trust isn't necessary. It's not the norm. Most families will start with this revocable trust where it's me, it's my husband, and we are each other's beneficiary. When I pass away, my assets go to my husband and his assets go to me. And all of our assets get loaded into this revocable trust. So the deed to our home is recorded with the county in the name of our trust. Any artwork, instruments, all of our assets get loaded here. Then when the second parent passes away, those assets trickle down to those 3 children who are typical based upon what I outlined for them. They can't be addicted to anything. They'll get a payout at 25 for a little piece of it. They'll get a payout for at age 30. It just totally depends. You can decide what that looks like. But when the second parent passes away for Jackson, his piece will land in a special needs trust. I never want assets in Jackson's name because it could make him ineligible for benefits. So that special needs trust in our case is right down there where it says number 1, provision by the little dot. It's created through a provision after we pass away. The reason why we did that is there's nobody else coming to save us. There's no inheritance from grandma. It's just our assets for Jackson. So we don't have any money right now to stick away for him in what's called a standalone trust that's open for business today. I just want his trust created after we pass away. In the future, that could change. I might go and adjust my estate plan. So far, I've adjusted my estate planning twice. Brady's adjusted his 4 times. And you'll want to do this every 3 to 5 years, depending on if you have people change in your estate plan. I always counsel my clients to plan 2 to 5 people deep in their trustees that they're nominating, because people pass away, relationships dissolve, situations change, and we want to go across generations. If I'm only naming my siblings and they're around my same age, we're all going to pass away about the same time. So I need to think deeper. Who are people of this next generation? Like, who's the oldest cousin of Jackson that could potentially be named as one of the trustees? So that's the way that revocable trust works. This is best practice to have the revocable trust if you have assets. You're each other's beneficiary, assets flow to typical kids, and then Jackson's piece lands in a special needs trust once we die, or we can create a standalone trust now that we can fund today. But like I said, there are some states where the probate level is so high and the families don't have enough assets to meet that. So they don't really need the revocable trust right now, and they can do a testamentary will. And in that will, it does the same thing. It will say, after my passing, create the special needs trust. Or I also today created the standalone trust, and all of the money gets put into the standalone trust. So there's a lot of ways to do it. It's best to work with an attorney in your state. I speak with a lot of clients and they're like, well, I'm just going to use these forms online. And I don't recommend it. I definitely would work with an attorney who is very experienced in special needs trust planning. Now, we throw around this word called special needs trusts in the community, and people think it means the same thing. I want to just slow down just a little bit here and talk about different kinds of trusts. So there's a first party special needs trust. And a first party trust is if that money from grandpa's sale of the property in Idaho came to our house in a check for Jack. And it would come to our house in his name. The only thing I could do with it, because I want to try to keep him below $2,000 a month in his account, is to put it in an ABLE if the amount is less than $20,000, because that $20,000 max that was talked about earlier today. Or let's say it's $50,000. The only option I would have then is to put it in a first party trust. First party meaning Jackson. Jackson is the first party. It is his money. A first party trust, Social Security and Medicaid do not look at that. So it's great. And it would be a really good band-aid if that were ever to happen. And then I would want to work on spending that money down so that we could utilize that funding. Because if Jackson passed away, that money would get frozen for a minute. And the state of Utah would come back and say, okay, did we spend any money on Jackson for Medicaid? Because Utah's a Medicaid recovery state. So they would look at that and say, okay, we spent this much money on him for Medicaid premiums. We're going to claw back this much money. And then after that clawback or the Medicaid recovery happens, then they release the funds and then we can pay for the funeral and settle the estate. But that's a big shock for people because they're going to that fund to start to pay for funeral expenses and find that the fund is frozen. So first party is a good situation for unique circumstances. Maybe your child makes too much money with their business or something like that where they don't qualify for SSI or Medicaid. And so their funding needs to get tucked away into the first party trust. But for most cases, what we're looking at is when we say a special needs trust for our kids, we're talking about a third party special needs trust, or it could be called a third party supplemental needs trust because you have this SSI account and that money comes down every month into SSI or SSDI, and it only covers in certain things. There's not enough money there really to fund everything that your child needs. And so that's the purpose of this special needs trust, is to help supplement. It supplements what SSI and Medicaid don't cover. And you want to be careful with that because you don't want to use that trust funding money for things that are supposed to be covered by Social Security and Medicaid. So we talked about the two ways to create it. Again, my special needs trust is a provision. It gets created after I die, or you can have the standalone trust. It's open for business. Once you create it, you can start putting money into it. Anybody can put money into it, grandma, grandpa, but just make sure grandma and grandpa update their estate plan and they mention Jackson's third party special needs trust to be the receptacle for that inheritance, if that's the case. If they don't ever update the funding, it's going to be a first party or an ABLE account, depending upon the amount, because it wasn't done correctly. So this is why it's so important to have these conversations and not to plan in a silo. The thing that you should know about Social Security and Medicaid is they don't look at the funding inside of that third party trust. So it's also a shelter, just like the ABLE account and just like the first party trust. There's so many types of trust. You'll want to work with your attorney. The one that we know that we need for our kids is that third party. But as far as the planning for mom and dad, they can do it in a variety of ways. So there's other things that we would want to talk about. Maybe it's a pooled special needs trust, a pooled third party special needs trust. This is where Jackson would have an account for his money, his inheritance, inside a bigger pool of trusts. This organization that manages this big pool of trust can be a company or it can be a nonprofit, and they take that whole entire group of funding from all of these accounts and they invest it and they're paying the taxes on it. And depending upon which company you use, they can also be paying the bills for your child using that money. But there's a caveat I really want to point out on this. A lot of them don't have beneficiary options. And so once your child passes away, that funding goes to help the nonprofit, or there's some that do have a beneficiary option. So it's really important to consider beneficiaries on the special needs trust, also the costs that they're charging you to do that, and decide if it's a good fit for you. I have some clients where it's mom and dad and just one child. There's not a lot of other family around. And so for them, a pooled trust is a really great idea. And some states have multiple options with the pooled trust. Other people are like, no way, I don't want to mess with it. I'm just going to have, somebody else do it. There's also the terms revocable and irrevocable. While I'm alive, my revocable trust for our family can be changed. But then once I pass away and Jackson's piece goes into his special needs trust, it becomes irrevocable because I've passed away. So work with your attorneys to figure out what is the best fit for you. The other big thing that I would say, and I might have a slide on this later, is trustees. It's so important to identify a trustee strategy. So an executor is the person right after you pass away who's going to execute your wishes. They're going to let the IRS know that you've passed. They'll manage the death certificate and make all of the arrangements. But the trustee is the person, and it can be the same person. The trustee is the person who's actually managing the trust. So it could be the trustee of your revocable trust and helping to manage the money that remains in your revocable trust based upon your wishes. But then there could also be a trustee for Jackson's trust. Do I want my brother to do it? And then beyond my brother, who used to work for Goldman Sachs, he's a finance guy, who is it going to be beyond him? And if I don't have enough people, I want to think about maybe looking at a corporate trustee, or maybe a pooled trust, or maybe I use a hybrid model. So for my situation, once we pass away, our local credit union, who has a well-respected trust department, will become the corporate trustee over our trust. And then my brother will be the person who's the family connection, and he'll be the point of contact for the corporate trust. But the corporate trust will pay the taxes, invest the money. There is a fee associated with that. In our situation, the very first year for them to get it set up, they charge 2%. And then every year after that, they charge 1%. And so you think, gosh, that's a lot of money. And it is, right? But if my brother was doing it, I can't expect him to do that out of the goodness of his heart without and not utilize resources that would help him manage that trust better. So I would want to allocate money for a tax professional for him. I would want to allocate money for a financial planner to invest the funds. So there are costs associated with an individual trustee, as well as a corporate trustee, as well as a pooled trust. The biggest concern is just who is going to do the job, and is it built layers deep in case my brother can't do it? So we call it kind of something called a micro board. I think of it as like all of these different seats on the planning bus. Who's going to manage the finances? Who will manage the caregiving? Who will manage the medical piece for Jackson's heart? Who will manage the waiver once he gets off our wait list? Housing, who's going to help figure that out? That's a lot to put on just one person. And so sometimes as we talk through it with our clients, with their family dynamics, we think of lots of people that can help have different pieces of it, and then we'll build layers deep. Sometimes we'll get to a point where there's just not anyone else. And so we'll actually look at professional guardianship services and organizations within the state, not necessarily the state itself, but organizations that function inside of your state that can act as those professional guardianship services or trustee services. The other thing that you'll want to do, and we have templates for this as well, is to communicate with family and friends. I know that you love Jackson. I don't expect you to leave him any funding, but if you do, please leave it in the ABLE. Please leave it in the Special Needs Trust. One of the things families have a really hard time figuring out is how much money do I leave in the trust? Because again, we're layering Social Security, SSI, SSDI, Medicaid healthcare, Medicaid waivers, the assets I leave for him. And then is that enough, or is there a gap? Because you're actually planning for 3 people. You've got to plan for mom and dad to get to the end of their life and consider things like assisted living. Do we want to travel? You know, what is our health like? So for mom and dad, and then we're also doing it for Jack. And so it's important that we have enough money. And the way that we figure this out is by calculating everything you have in play. So we want to look at your private assets. What have you saved? What does your retirement look like? Also take into account any insurance you have. Sometimes we find people have too much insurance. Other times we see that they don't have nearly enough because they've really only calculated for dad passing away and losing income, or mom passing away. They haven't accounted for all 3 people's funding. Then also look at the natural supports. One of the clients I talked to yesterday, they have a great extended family. I mean, they all live in the community, cousins are helping out. And so they've got a great support system. And then also benefits. Does your child qualify now? Will they qualify later? Or are they going to become ineligible at some point? What do we anticipate there? Then also think about your life insurance. I'll show these really quick and you can read back through these. But you want to coordinate the life insurance with the entire plan. Don't just get one policy and then just hope and like roll the dice that you're going to be okay. This is actually a math equation that we want to solve, and that's something where we have software where we help you figure it out. What is that number that you need? And then you can decide, am I good, or do I want to look at this number a little more closely? Make sure you tell your attorney what you have at play in your portfolio, not only so that they can account for it within the trust, but also so that we can help get you set up if you're lacking. And then the last piece of that is make sure you've paid for this really expensive pile of estate planning documents, and then you forget to title your assets. And I'll show you a slide on that too, but you want to make sure the beneficiaries are designated correctly. So again, Ryan, I'm Ryan's, he's mine as far as the spouse goes. And then after that, it names our 3 kids. But when it comes to Jackson, we name Jackson Special Needs Trust. Or you could just do Ryan and Jennie and then name the trust after that on the life insurance documents. And then the trust does the work of dividing all of that out. So if you do have a gap, you'll want to make sure that your insurance is okay. Again, for typical families, term insurance, that can be a strategy. For our families that have kids with IDD, it's not a great strategy. So if you have employer insurance, fantastic, but it does go away if you lose that job or leave the job or retire in most cases. There's also term insurance, but that was the boat I was in where we came to the end of the 20 years. And now we've got to hurry and figure it out because of my husband's cancer. We have some conversion options where you can convert your term over to a different policy, but some policies aren't convertible. So you'll want to definitely look at that and we can help you there. There's also some benefits with whole and also universal. And again, I teach a financial strategy class, so we would go into more detail there, but I just want to introduce terminology to you right now. I'm just going to show these slides briefly because there was such a great presentation earlier on this. I think the biggest thing I want to have you remember is that Social Security money comes in. You want to charge rent or fair share when you have SSI. And so that money will come out to you. You can pay household expenses with that, or you can push that back to your child's ABLE account and use it for QDE, qualified disability expenses. Or you could push that over to the special needs trust if you have a standalone special needs trust, not the provision that I have. You'd have to have a standalone. And then if there's some funding that's needed, you could take that funding from the trust and push it into the ABLE. I think of an ABLE as easy money in, easy money out. There's a debit card typically attached to it or a way to easily get the money out for the expenses that Jackson needs. And it's nice because you don't have to go to that trustee all the time to get the funding out. I've heard some people say that you can push money back from the ABLE account over to the trust. I have not found that to be true. I've confirmed that with the National ABLE Organization, and I have not found that to be a fact yet. So if somebody has documentation on that and they swear that's a thing, please let us know. But right now it only goes from SSI over to the parents or SSI to the ABLE, or from the parents to the special needs trust and from trust to ABLE. So it's a great strategy of how to move money around. Again, I'll just show these slides and you can watch it back in case there's something here I've documented in my bullets that wasn't covered earlier. But yes, the $100,000 maximum. Also, if your child's on SSDI, they don't have that maximum anymore because on SSDI, you don't have to worry about the asset threshold for SSDI. But just remember, if they're on Medicaid, you still most likely have the threshold of 2,000. So the 2,000 is still best practice. I saw a chat earlier that we're hoping to get that raised. Oh gosh, wouldn't that be nice? So it's not so much work for parents to manage that. So again, our goal is to really, that's why we do these webinars with nonprofits, is to give this information back. This is a plethora of information. We could go deeper on each of these areas. And if you have questions, please let us know. We have about just about 10 minutes left. So if there's any questions that I didn't catch, I'd be happy to talk through questions that you have or something you want me to clarify. I know we have to move pretty fast on the webinar. We do offer free consultations so that we can evaluate your family situation, figure out what might be the best fit for you. Where are you stuck? Where do you need guidance? What's confusing to you? What's frustrating? And we can help you out. All right.
Jennie, we did have a question in the Q&A. from Yvette, and she said that their greatest concern is what will happen to their child when they're no longer around. They have a limited family network, and so they have all the required documents of will, special needs trust, healthcare directive, but are asking about what reputable and highly recommended agencies or organizations are available to take over guardianship and financial management. They live in New Jersey, but just think about other people in the country as well.
Yeah, so it's different for every single state. It also depends if in New Jersey, if you have the DDD waiver, what you would have access to, how much of a support system will be built in through the waiver, and then we could figure out what type of support is needed beyond you and your family members. What I would do if I were working with you is I would do a deep dive on New Jersey and figure out what your options are and how we could figure out additional people to put on your planning bus. Because in your situation, it's not going to be one person. So we would address the funding in the trust first and figure out what strategy to use for the trustee. Then we would look at caregiving. We would look to see how the waiver for the DDD waiver in New Jersey is going to supplement that, and then what supports are needed on top of that. But it's not only caregiving, it's housing, it's employment supports, it's the mental health piece. Like, it's very multifaceted. So I think, was it Yvette or Yvonne? I would work with you individually to figure out the best strategy for your loved one. But that's at a high level without having time right now to go into my New Jersey folders to figure out, go to this organization. Yes, that's the strategy I would use.
And then we had another question that asked from Linda, do Medicaid expenses have to be tracked to make sure the expenses meet specific criteria? And then we had another question come in after that.
Okay, Medicaid, there's two programs to that, so I need a little bit more information. Are you talking about Medicaid waiver benefits through your state, or are you talking about Medicaid health care? So maybe let's answer the other question while they answer
Okay.
my question.
We have another one, anonymous. When my son was born, he has Down syndrome. I was given paperwork for SSI and he was denied. Now that he has been diagnosed with autism level 3, should I reapply or wait until he is 18?
It depends on your income levels and what's called deeming, and how much money you make, and if you're at the threshold of where he would qualify before he's 18. So I would need to know a little bit more about your situation. And then they would also look at eligibility to make sure that the child has the right eligibility requirements. So if you feel like you do meet the threshold for income, then yes, I would apply again. And also, I should tell you, when you guys apply for Social Security, if you get denied, please appeal it, because so many people get denied the very first time. And also, if your child has an IQ level, as far as the cognitive processing, and let's say they're like 82, and you're like, there's no way they're going to qualify. Sometimes people still do, because Social Security looks mostly at the IQ level and the cognitive level of intellectual developmental disability. But a family that I was working with today, they have a diagnosis called 22q deletion, and the IQ's around 80-ish, but the functional limitations that this individual has because of things like executive function and working memory and the way that they interact socially will make them be able to qualify in a different area of Social Security. It's mostly cognitive, and the cognitive, when you have the functional limitations, the cognitive is taken into context. So like, he has great vocabulary, and so it makes it look like, oh, he can totally do this. But when you look at all of the other factors, that he can't keep pace, he can't remember what the person says, he can't follow directions, then it shows the functional limitation. So work with someone who knows what they're doing as far as Social Security if you get denied, and let's dig deeper into that neuropsych evaluation and see what else is there.
So the follow-up to the Medicaid question, she said both Medicaid areas.
Yeah, so the Medicaid healthcare, it's going to cover specific things. You would want to work with your state's Medicaid program to see what it is they cover and what would be the benefits for your child and what's medically necessary. On the Medicaid waiver, typically the way that works, and I hope I'm answering your question, but when you get off of the wait list or you get into services, they'll do what's called an assessment, and they'll see what is it that your child needs. what support services are available. And then they'll build a budget based upon what is needed. And then services or service providers or parent support will be added in. So if you, like in our situation, if we were to receive the parent support piece, the funding, which maybe is what you're talking about, I don't necessarily need to track how I use that. Those are wages that come to me for caring for my child. The rest of Jackson's budget would be paid out through vendors, or if you're on like a SAS program, like a self-administered program, or SDP in California, like self-determination program, where you can pick who you work with. It's all tracked through vendors and for people that are supplying those services to you. So I'm not sure which money it is that you have free reign access to. An ABLE account would be something, yes, you would want to keep records just in case it was ever monitored. And again, I have resources for the monitoring. But any free reign money that you have, Social Security, you would probably want to keep receipts and records for that. If the money's coming from Social Security and they pay you rent or fair share, that becomes household money and you can spend that the way that you want to. So you don't need to track that either. Did we answer that or still questions? And somebody just put in the chat for Yvonne or Yvette, Plan New Jersey. Yes, you'd want to take a close look at them. I am familiar and they're great. They only do certain things, so you'll want to make sure you figure out if it's a good fit for your scenario.
She said that answered her question too.
Oh, good. Good. I guessed right. Okay. Well, again, please use the free consultation. We can check to say, yep, you really are as good as you think you are, or nope, you're right, you're struggling in this area. Let's figure out how to fix your gaps in your plan. But, it's one of those things where you first had this diagnosis and you learn to be the mama bear or the papa bear for your child all through their life and advocate, and pull in the services and figure out disability support systems. This is the same thing. Everything you're doing is getting your ducks in a row. And the more that you can do now is helping, that phrase of like, my future self will thank me. After you're gone, that future self, your kids are going to be so grateful that you did your job and getting your ducks in a row. And just remember, this is not a one or done process. You'll want to update it because people change, relationships change, people pass away, you lose jobs. And it's just a great exercise. It's tender. It's definitely brings up a lot of emotions as we plan about what life will look like. And our biggest wish is that we want our kids to be safe. We want them to live somewhere beautiful. We want them to have access to all the supports they need. And you can do it through this life care planning process. One piece that I didn't mention is, we have this trust, and Jackson's piece will land in his special needs trust. I want to preserve my funding for retirement to get me through the end of my life with me and my husband. And I don't want to be nickel and diming my retirement to save for Jack. And so what we're doing is something called a survivorship policy or a second to die policy, that after the second parent passes away, this one policy is just going to go right into Jack's trust, fund him outright. There'll be plenty of money. And then the rest of our retirement that's left over and selling of our home and everything, that'll get distributed to those 3 kids. So just know there's so many strategies that we can help you figure out based upon what your portfolio looks like and what your situation with family looks like as well. All right. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope this was helpful to you as parents.
Thank you so much, Jenny. This was great. And I think a big takeaway is that, everyone's situation is different. And so getting a very personalized plan is the best way to go. So please take advantage of that free consultation. We will be sending out an email that has a link to this recording, as well as follow-up information from CaringTide and follow-up information from NDSS about upcoming webinars and events, as well as the additional resources that we have at NDSS. So thank you everyone for attending. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you again, Jenny, for being with us tonight.